Hello, this is Michael Garino. I'm going to give you an overview of Flows, the newest feature set within Plural. But before we go into this in detail, I just want to give a little bit of background on what Plural is and why Flows is important. So Plural is meant to be a full stack software development lifecycle around Kubernetes. It encompasses a number of different main concerns you have to accomplish to manage Kubernetes clusters, especially at scale. The first of which is GitOps. The second is Terraform management. You're going to be creating your infrastructure likely in the cloud and likely with an infrastructure as code toolchain like Terraform. Kubernetes dashboarding, just to give you visibility into the actual API state of the cluster, and self-service, which is just meant to give you a simplified way of providing the golden paths for the repeated creation of infrastructure necessary to build your Kubernetes fleets and ultimately deploy to them. There's also a number of ancillary features that you get with including some SecOps tools for policy management and CVE management and compliance reporting, and cost management FinOps tools. So you can get easy cluster and namespace breakdowns of costs that's visible throughout your fleet, and then also scaling recommendations on how to fix them with the automated PR generation with our AI component. Um, that said, almost all of this is very geared towards a platform engineering persona. It's giving you the tools to be able to manage infrastructure at scale, get a consistent working experience through a large set of Kubernetes clusters or even a small and medium-sized set, and then allow that to be a base to be built upon by your application developers. But we still want to give a proper and really useful experience to those application developers so that they can actually get value out of Plural themselves. That's the goal of Flows. So Flows are meant to be basically a single portal for developers to see what's deployed into their Kubernetes clusters and then also operate on them. You can see a pretty basic example of a few flows in our demo environment here. We have a flow for the Plural console itself, and then a flow for this flow test service. The idea being that what you're seeing here are the two Plural services, which are the two instances of this flow test application, one in a staging cluster and one in a prod cluster. But there's also a pipeline to control promotions between them. The PRs that have been historically registered against this flow. And then you get actually the ability to see a lot of observability data alongside that. So if we were to dive into one of these services like this one right here, I can actually see the logs from all of the pods of this service. I can actually also see observability data. There's only one pod in this case, so you can see that one. But if we would go to this one right here, we'll get a little bit more interesting heat map of the memory utilization at the pod level or at the node level. And you can also get metrics information on CPU bound resources within Kubernetes here. So like basically what you're trying to get is a unified operational experience for that developer, and a repeated way for them to understand their services and how to promote their code between various different stages for those services. That said, it goes beyond what we're seeing here. And the main benefit of Plural holistically is getting that single pane of glass interface and system to be able to tie all these tools together starts to give you the actual real power of AI and your management of infrastructure. So a good example of this can be seen in our alert integration as well. So you can actually have alerts tied to flows. It's going to be clearly visible within the UI. That's interesting enough. But when an alert goes into firing state, like this one right here, it will actually trigger our AI engine. The AI engine will see what's happening in the alert, and it has the capability, because you've already integrated all these things together, to search logs, pull requests, whatever might be necessary to come to an understanding of this alert. So that's what we're seeing right here. It's sees this 500 error rate issue. It's identified from the logs that's coming from this ping endpoint, and then it's identified from this historical pull request that it's actually due to this issue of basically us introducing a error at every Unix timestamp divisible by 3. If we go into here, you can see it's actually found this specific file at one of the PRs that we've had and the actual code that's issued it. If we were to expand this, you would actually see that from the pull request that it is found. And it'll give you some basic examples of what might be happening. But like standard Kubernetes errors with the Plural AI engine, you also have the capability of suggesting how to fix the issue, which we can go through right here. And it's found that file again and showing the line of code that might need to be resolved. And then you can actually use our PR tool call to be able to actually generate a PR just to fix it, because we think this is almost certainly the correct fix. There's the PR. And we can see the code change that it actually made, which is correct. It's removing that bit of unnecessary code that was introducing the 500 error rate for the purposes of this demo, exactly like we want. But let's just close it out so that we don't break our demo in the future. So that's giving you a pretty clear immediate value prop of like basically automated troubleshooting of basic alerts that might come into your system. There's actually more capability that flows have as well, though. One is there's this unified flow chat experience. The purpose of a flow chat is to basically give developers a self-serviceable way for them to inspect and understand their infrastructure. Common situation here is developers just frankly don't know the details of Kubernetes, what might theoretically be going wrong there, and they don't know how to necessarily navigate the various different data sets to be able to understand their various applications. So flows, you get some value just by having a native LLM chat to be able to do that. But the value of the flow chat is we have a number of different LLM tool calls automatically integrated with the infrastructure known by the flow, so they can bring that into context and explain it to that user. A good example is, so what you're going to see here is it's actually going to be making a tool call to actually figure all that out. And the tool call has actually queried that specific Plural service and is now giving us a quick overview of what it might be. I can even, say, okay, I understand what a service count, a service deployment, and everything is. But maybe I want to understand a little bit more about the service monitor. And that is actually the service monitor spec. This is some pretty basic, just Kubernetes introspection that you might have, but Plural has the capability of understanding systems outside of Kubernetes as well. We saw it use log aggregation. It can also actually understand historical PRs. So let's say something like this. And this is basically giving you another example of what we saw before with that alert insight, but in this case, just sort of coming in from the chat experience. So you get like a pretty broad capability of being able to introspect infrastructure, query it, converse with the AI to be able to understand it, and effectively pair program your way through a troubleshooting journey. But another really powerful feature of flows, and you can sort of see it right here and then also here, is an integration with MCP. So let's just go back to that flow chat I was working on before. But the premise behind MCP is it gives you a unified protocol to be able to interact with external systems from the context of an LLM chat. Now, this is a very basic example of just an MCP server that's interacting with Slack. You can see the various different things that it can theoretically do. We can execute it right now. So it's, in this case, it has first listed the Slack channels to find that inch channel, and then it actually posted a message to that channel directly and did what we actually wanted to do. You actually get to also see some value of our implementation of a chat because it has some basically agentic behavior to be able to call tools in iteration and then actually understand the output and then do more sophisticated operations there. But the Slack example is actually a pretty trivial example of what I think is valuable with MCP. The more valuable case is it basically allows the flow chat to be the equivalent of an even lighter weight no code operational tool interface. So you can define various different operational tasks within the MCP protocol interface, connect it to Plural, and then have Plural's flow chat be the way that you actually interact with them. A basic example, we can just sort of go to our own instance of Plural right here. We've basically made a MCP server for our own internal use case to be able to see the details of a user's Plural account, the users on that account, add or remove people from our enterprise plan, which is a custom plan that's not in self-service, and also see details of like the cloud console cluster. That's really useful from an operational context because there's like, sporadic cases where we need to do these manual tasks, and having the MCP interface to be able to do it is really, really nice. Another thing that's important to know about this as well is governance. So obviously you don't want to have either an AI or even just arbitrary engineers be able to theoretically interact with a system kind of like this without some degree of governance. And you have that by default with Plural. Everything within Plural has a robust permissioning structure on top of it. So you can see there's read and write permissions added to the specific MCP server. But it also has an audit trail. So every single request that goes through that server is fully audited. And you can actually use that to guarantee like full compliance of access policies or whatever auditing you might need for internal system changes in an enterprise context. So you get that just sort of straight out of the box with Plural, and then you get the really rapid iteration benefit of just being able to have a usable interface to interact with this from a pretty robust chat experience. Another thing that's also worth mentioning about the MCP integration is there is actually authentication built in with Plural as well. We will have the ability to mint a JWT that can be used to authenticate an incoming MCP request, and that JWT would also include various claims like the AD groups that the user is attached to, whether that user is an admin to provide basic authorization as well. So you can have very lightweight code, basically authenticate and authorize a user to be able to do the various actions on a server and then fail it if it's not valid. Yeah, that's a really good experience of what that MCP experience might be. The last thing that's actually worth mentioning as well with flow chats is there's actually a knowledge graph built into the system as well. So if you've come to an explanation of what might have happened, you can basically tell the flow to make a entity in our knowledge graph to save that insight. And then once it's done, it will be available for future tool calls if necessary. And so, yeah, you can see it's tried to add an observation a little bit prematurely, then it had to create an entity for it, and added another observation as well to that entity as part of the process of actually adding that to the knowledge graph. The benefit there is, you're going to go through various different issues throughout troubleshooting your infrastructure. Sometimes we're going to be able to one-shot an explanation of exactly what's going on. Sometimes it's going to require a little bit of collaboration between you and the AI and maybe your teammates. That knowledge should be reified. It should be persisted and available in the case that the issue recurs. And by saving it to the knowledge graph, we can add that to context for future calls or future issues that might happen from an alert or whatever it might be. And it could also be useful for a user to query in, an actual manual case with a flow chat to be able to get that information right back out. So yeah, this is a pretty thorough overview of a lot of the benefits of flows. Feel free to consult our docs at docs.plural.sh to understand a little bit more of how to create a flow, and then how you can accomplish a number of different engineering use cases on top of them for your own specific enterprise applications. But yeah, if you're interested, feel free to let us know at sales@plural.sh. Otherwise, thanks for taking the time to go through this demo.